He warned us about a global pandemic in 2015. 5 years later, he became the face of the solution, front and center on every late night show, every WHO presser, every headline that used the word unprecedented. But look a little closer and you'll see Bill Gates wasn't just investing in vaccines. He was designing the plumbing that would carry them, funding the traffic lights that decide who moves, and underwriting the news anchors who cheered it all on. So the question isn't did he have good intentions? The question is, when the richest man on earth owns both the cure and the cash register, do we still call it philanthropy or do we call it planning? Because the prediction is harmless until the prophet also owns the patent. And to understand how he set the chessboard long before the first pawn moved, we have to rewind to a single 8-minute speech in Vancouver.
Health and agriculture of these poor countries. So that, it's good news that I'm afraid the normal way people see headlines, they might not be aware of it. They might think it's all fruitless.
That 2015 TED Talk, only 8 minutes, a black sweater, no PowerPoint fireworks. Yet Gates mapped out testing hubs, pop-up vaccine factories, global contact tracing apps, and a standing medical reserve corps ready to parachute in. Most viewers clapped, clicked share, and forgot. Gates quietly went shopping. By 2016, the Gates Foundation had seeded CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, giving it a head start budget larger than the health ministries of some nations. He poured money into mRNA research years before most doctors could spell it. He bankrolled digital ID pilots in West Africa for vaccine records, then partnered with MasterCard to test biometric payment systems that just happened to link health status to spending rights. So when 2020 arrived, Gates got to say, "I told you so," but the bigger twist was that every valve in the response pipeline already had his logo on it. But the public face was only half the story, because the private wallet was doing something far more interesting. Few people have heard of Cascade Investment LLC. That's by design. No flashy letterhead, no public-facing website, just an innocuous office in Kirkland, Washington, guarding roughly $40 billion in assets. Inside the portfolio, farmland, now over 300,000 acres, making Gates America's largest private farmland owner. Stakes in waste management, Ecolab, Canadian National Railway, all backbone industries you'd need to reboot supply chains after a global shock. Quiet bets on AI-driven health data companies, because the next product isn't a pill, it's the algorithm that decides who gets one. During the pandemic years, Cascade's holdings didn't just survive, they ballooned. Rail traffic spiked, farmland prices hit 20-year highs, and clean tech water companies, also in the portfolio, landed federal contracts for sanitation resilience. Gates had publicly walked away from Microsoft to look humble. Privately, he was cornering the market on anything a destabilized planet can't live without, and he used the friendliest cover story on earth to do it, a charity everyone trusts. On paper, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a non-profit. In practice, it functions like a family office meets foreign policy engine. It writes checks to the WHO so large that when the US briefly froze its funding, Gates was suddenly the organization's single biggest benefactor. Bigger than Germany, bigger than Japan. It donates to Gavi, then sits on Gavi's board to approve the very vaccine deals it just financed. It pays consultants to draft best practice pandemic playbooks, then sponsors the conferences where governments adopt them verbatim. Remember, US law only requires a private foundation to spend 5% of its endowment each year on grants. The remaining 95% can be invested like any hedge fund, often in the same industries the grants will later buoy. It's a legal double dip. Influence with the left hand, returns with the right. Critics started whispering, conspiracy forums started yelling, but the loudest distractions only helped bury the provable receipts. Yes, some folks on the internet claimed Gates created the virus in a secret lab or planned to microchip everyone. Easy headlines to mock, easy strawmen to burn. But here's the part that never made late-night comedy. Event 201, a Gates-funded tabletop simulation in October 2019 that walked through a hypothetical global outbreak, right down to the supply chain snarls and social media misinformation crackdowns that would become reality 4 months later. ID 2020, another Gates-backed alliance pushing digital identities tied to vaccination records, now piloted in Bangladesh and gaining traction with airlines as a travel passport. Massive funding for Oxitec, the gene-edited mosquito company releasing insects in Florida and Brazil under the banner of disease prevention, conveniently patent protected by investors linked to Cascade. So no, Bill Gates didn't cackle in a basement mixing vials, but he did bankroll the infrastructure that turns a virus into a data-driven revenue stream, and he did it years before patient zero. Still think that media halo was organic goodwill? Let's look at who holds the camera. Since 2000, the Gates Foundation has funneled over $300 million into journalism partnerships, from the BBC and The Guardian to NPR and Der Spiegel. The grants often cover health reporting, fact-checking hubs, and solutions journalism. Sounds noble, right? Except when reporters at recipients like The Guardian pitch investigative pieces scrutinizing Gates' farmland spree or Cascade's tax strategies, editors quietly steer them away. According to former staff quoted by Columbia Journalism Review, NPR discloses big donors when covering politics, yet rarely highlights the Gates money when running glowing vaccine coverage. The result? A media landscape where Gates is cast as Mr. Rogers with a spreadsheet, and anyone questioning the optics is hashtagged into oblivion. Meanwhile, the post-pandemic chessboard was quietly rearranging itself in Gates' favor. By 2022, Gates wasn't just a billionaire, he was a policy node. Choose a continent, Africa. Gates-funded labs now supply the diagnostics pipeline, and Gavi bulk buys doses with Gates cash. Europe, his green ammonia ventures receive EU subsidies in the name of energy transition. United States, as the top private farmland owner, he's suddenly a stakeholder in any conversation about food security or biofuel mandates. He tweets about climate resilient seeds, and guess what? Cascade just increased its share in Deere & Company, the tractor maker digitizing farmland for future carbon credits. Gates speaks at COP26 on methane reduction, while Cascade backs breakthrough energy ventures investing in companies that will sell the sensors to measure methane. Problem, proposal, product, all under one umbrella, and none of this would be possible without a loophole older than Gates himself. Rockefeller used foundations to whitewash monopolies. Today, Gates, Bezos, and BlackRock use them to shield assets, shape policy, and dodge inheritance tax, all while earning public applause. Here's the playbook. Park wealth in a foundation, full tax deduction. Invest 95% of that wealth in industries you publicly champion. Donate the 5% to NGOs whose policies will create demand for those industries. Watch legislators cite those NGOs as independent experts when drafting regulation. Collect returns tax-free because technically it's all in the public interest. Gates didn't invent the system, he just updated it for the biotech century. Bill Gates shouted the warning, bankrolled the response, and cashed in on the aftermath, legally, loudly, and with a PR halo brighter than any cathedral window. Was it foresight or inside baseball? Genius or gaming the rules? Maybe a bit of both. But the next time a billionaire steps on stage predicting a catastrophe, ask yourself two things. Who's writing the speech? And who already owns the cure?